The Christmas dinner table fell silent as my mother-in-law raised her crystal glass, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light from the chandelier. "A toast," Susan announced, her perfectionist smile fixed in place. "To Michael for his promotion, and to Rachel," she paused, her eyes finding mine across the table, "who only lives in this beautiful neighborhood by sheer luck. It's the Miller family money that put this roof over your head, after all." 20 pairs of eyes shifted uncomfortably toward me. My husband squeezed my hand under the table, but I felt strangely calm. I'd been waiting for this moment for months. I reached for the small wrapped package I'd placed beside my plate, the one containing the property deed with my name on it, the one that would silence Susan forever. What happened next changed our family dynamics permanently and taught me that sometimes the sweetest victories come when you've been underestimated all along. No one saw it coming, especially not Susan. I met Michael Miller during my final year of college in Boston. He was completing his MBA, and I was finishing my computer science degree. We were from completely different worlds. Him from Westchester County with its manicured lawns and country clubs, me from a small town in Ohio where my parents ran the local hardware store. Susan Miller was horrified when Michael brought me home. I wasn't from their social circle, didn't summer in the Hamptons, and worst of all, I had career ambitions that didn't involve charity luncheons. Quaint, she called my background, in that way that made it sound like an infectious disease. My first Christmas with the Millers set the tone. Susan accidentally spilled red wine on my only nice dress, then lent me one of hers that was 2 sizes too large. "Some women just aren't built for designer clothes," she said loudly as I emerged from the bathroom swimming in silk. Everyone tittered politely while Michael's father, Robert, stared uncomfortably at his plate. Despite Susan's constant digs, Michael and I got married 3 years later. Susan insisted on planning the entire wedding, ignoring all my input. "Darling, I've been to more galas than you've had hot dinners," she told me. "Trust me, your little ideas would just embarrass everyone." On our wedding day, she introduced me to her friends as the computer girl who somehow captured Michael's heart. What Susan never bothered to learn was that my little computer job had grown into a senior position at a cybersecurity startup. While she was dismissing me, I was helping build encryption software for financial institutions. The company went public just after our wedding, and my stock options were suddenly worth 7 figures. Michael and I decided to keep this quiet, not because we were planning anything, but because my success had nothing to do with his family, and we wanted to build our life on our own terms. Michael had broken away from the family investment firm to start his own financial consulting business, much to his mother's dismay. When we started looking at houses in an upscale Boston suburb, Susan immediately assumed Michael was using his trust fund. "At least he's supporting you properly," she told me over brunch one Sunday. "Though I still think you two should move closer to us in Westchester. Michael belongs here." The truth was, Michael's business was just getting off the ground. He hadn't touched his trust fund. I was the one who could afford the down payment on our dream home, a beautiful colonial with a wraparound porch and enough bedrooms for the family we hoped to have. When we closed on the house, I put it solely in my name as a financial decision we made together. Michael was taking risks with his new business, and we wanted to protect our home. Susan and Robert gave us a housewarming gift, an ostentatious crystal vase that Susan reminded me cost more than my parents' car. "Try not to break it, dear," she said, placing it prominently in our living room without asking. "It's an heirloom now." That vase became a symbol of everything Susan represented: beautiful, expensive, and completely imposing its presence in my life without permission. Sometimes I fantasized about accidentally knocking it over, but instead I just moved it to a high shelf in the guest room closet whenever she wasn't visiting. For 2 years, we settled into a rhythm. Michael's business gained traction, my career continued to flourish, and we maintained polite but distant relations with his parents. Susan would call weekly to remind Michael of the position waiting for him at his father's firm and to inquire when I might be settling down to start a family. What Susan didn't know was that we had been trying for a baby, experiencing 2 early miscarriages that devastated us both. Michael wanted to tell his parents, but I couldn't bear the thought of Susan's false sympathy, or worse, her suggestion that my body was failing at this too. Then came the invitation to spend Christmas at the Miller family home, the first time in 3 years. Robert had been diagnosed with early-stage prostate cancer, and while his prognosis was excellent, Susan insisted on a proper family Christmas, just in case. We couldn't refuse. What I didn't realize was that Susan had a grand plan brewing, one that would culminate in the most humiliating Christmas dinner of my life, but also in a moment of triumph I never expected to have. As Christmas approached, Susan's calls became more frequent. "We're having everyone this year," she announced. "The whole family. Even Aunt Marjorie is flying in from Phoenix." What she meant was that there would be witnesses, lots of them, to whatever she had planned. Michael and I arrived at the Miller estate on December 23rd. The house was decked in professional decorations, garlands wrapped perfectly around banisters, a 12-foot tree dripping with heirloom ornaments, and enough twinkling lights to land a small aircraft. The air smelled of pine, cinnamon, and Susan's signature perfume. "Rachel, darling," Susan air-kissed both my cheeks as we entered. "That sweater is festive." Her eyes lingered on my red cashmere pullover, one I'd specifically chosen because it was elegant and expensive. I suppose everyone has their own interpretation of holiday attire. I had come prepared this year. Inside my suitcase was the small wrapped box containing the property deed. I'd been saving it for months, unsure if I'd ever actually present it, but something told me this Christmas might be the time. That evening, Susan cornered me in the kitchen while I was helping with appetizers. "I heard Michael's little business is struggling," she said, carefully arranging smoked salmon on crackers. "Robert and I were just saying how fortunate you both are to have that house to fall back on. Michael's trust fund was such good planning on our part." I froze. "His business is doing well, actually. We're very proud of what he's built." "Oh, of course, dear, but these consultant ventures are so unpredictable, not like the family firm." She patted my arm. "Just know there's always a safety net, for him at least." At dinner that night, Susan seated me next to Cousin Jeffrey, who spent the entire meal explaining cryptocurrency to me, as if I hadn't helped develop security protocols for blockchain transactions. When I tried to contribute to the conversation, Susan cut in, "Rachel has some sort of computer job, Jeffrey, but she's not really in finance like the rest of us." The next morning, Christmas Eve, I overheard Susan talking to Michael's sister Elizabeth in the sunroom. "I just worry about their stability," Susan was saying. "That house is far too expensive for them. Michael won't admit it, but I know they're stretched thin. And Rachel, with her little tech job, it's not sustainable. Mom, I think they're doing fine, Elizabeth replied. Rachel's company's actually pretty successful. Please, Elizabeth, she's a glorified IT girl. Without the Miller name and money, they'd be in some apartment in the city. I slipped away before they could see me, my heart pounding. I checked the small gift box in my suitcase again, running my finger over the ribbon. Not yet, I told myself. Not yet. Christmas Day arrived with a flurry of activity. Presents were exchanged in the morning. Susan and Robert gave us a check with many zeros to help with the house maintenance, as Susan put it. Michael tried to refuse, but Susan insisted. We know things must be tight, darling. We're just helping. By afternoon, relatives began arriving for dinner. Aunt Marjorie with her 3 adult children, Uncle Philip and his new wife, cousins from Connecticut, Michael's former classmates who were practically family, the house filled with people who had known the Millers for generations, people who saw me as the outsider who had somehow infiltrated their ranks. I noticed Susan giving me appraising looks throughout the day, like a predator sizing up its prey. During pre-dinner drinks, she guided important family friends toward me with leading introductions. This is Rachel, Michael's wife. She's from, where was it again, dear? Some small town in the Midwest. So charming that Michael found someone so different. I maintained my composure, smiling and engaging in conversation, while internally counting the minutes until dinner would be over. Michael sensed my tension and stayed close, his hand protectively on the small of my back. As we all sat down for Christmas dinner, I noticed my place card was directly across from Susan. The table was a Martha Stewart vision. Fine china, sterling silver, crystal glasses, and a centerpiece of white roses and evergreens. 22 people arranged perfectly according to Susan's social hierarchy. Robert stood to carve the turkey while Susan supervised. Not too thick on the slices, Robert. You know Aunt Marjorie prefers it delicate. The first hint that something specific was planned came during the soup course. Susan clinked her spoon against her water glass. Before we continue, I have an announcement, she said, looking around the table with practiced graciousness. Robert and I are so pleased to have everyone here this Christmas, especially as we have some wonderful news to share. She nodded to Robert, who looked momentarily confused before recovering. Yes, well, the thing is, he began, we've decided to help Michael and Rachel upgrade their living situation. Susan interrupted smoothly. We've put a down payment on a house in our neighborhood, just 3 streets over from us. The table erupted in congratulatory murmurs. Michael's fork clattered against his plate. Mom, what are you talking about? He asked, his voice tight. It's time you came home, darling, Susan replied. Your little independent phase has been amusing, but with the baby coming, you'll need family close by. My head snapped up. Baby? What baby? Susan's smile never faltered. Elizabeth mentioned you weren't drinking, and you've put on a little weight, dear. I simply connected the dots. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. The room went silent. Every eye turned to me, some curious, some pitying, all waiting. I'm not pregnant, Susan, I said quietly, and we're very happy in our home. Susan's smile tightened. Well, not yet, perhaps, but soon, I hope, and when you are, you'll need proper space. That house you're in now. She waved her hand dismissively. It's fine for playing house, but it's not really suitable for raising a Miller. Michael started to object, but Susan wasn't finished. She raised her glass. A toast, she announced, her voice carrying effortlessly across the table. To Michael for his promotion, and to Rachel. She paused, her eyes finding mine across the table. who only lives in this beautiful neighborhood by sheer luck. It's the Miller family money that put this roof over your head, after all." The silence that followed was deafening. My husband squeezed my hand under the table, but I felt strangely calm. I'd been waiting for this moment for months. I reached for the small wrapped package I'd placed beside my plate earlier, the one containing the property deed with my name on it, the one that would silence Susan forever. "Actually, Susan," I said, my voice steadier than I expected, "I brought something I've been meaning to share with the family." All eyes shifted to the small package in my hands. It was wrapped in elegant silver paper with a deep blue ribbon, the same colors as the Miller family crest that hung above the fireplace. "A Christmas gift? How thoughtful," Susan said with a dismissive wave. "We can open personal gifts after dinner, dear." "I think now is the perfect time," Michael said, backing me up. He knew what was in the package. We'd discussed this moment for months, always deciding against it. Until now. I slid the package across the table towards Susan. "Please, I insist." Susan's carefully plucked eyebrows arched slightly, but social protocol demanded she accept the gift graciously in front of her audience. She delicately untied the ribbon and removed the paper with the precision of someone who had opened thousands of expensive presents. Inside was a simple document folder with a bow on top. Susan opened it, expecting, perhaps, a donation made in her name or a tacky vacation voucher she could later mock. Her face froze as she scanned the first page. "What is this?" she asked, her voice suddenly thin. "That's the deed to our house," I said calmly. "You'll notice it's in my name, only my name," Michael added. "Rachel bought the house, Mom. She paid for it entirely." Susan's face flushed crimson. "That's impossible. You don't have that kind of money." "My little tech job, as you call it, I was an early employee at SecureTech. When we went public last year, my stock options were worth just over $2 million. Aunt Marjorie gasped. Uncle Philip choked slightly on his wine. "We never corrected your assumptions," I continued, feeling a strange power in finally speaking these truths. "You were so certain that Michael was supporting me, that his family money was keeping us afloat. It never occurred to you that I might be successful in my own right." Susan stared at the document, flipping through the pages as if searching for evidence of forgery. "Robert," she hissed, "look at this." Robert adjusted his glasses and leaned over. After a moment, he let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, and to my surprise, he looked almost impressed. "Michael hasn't touched his trust fund," I continued. "His business is profitable, extremely profitable, because he's talented and works incredibly hard. Neither of us needed the Miller money." Susan's knuckles were white around her water glass. "Why didn't you say anything?" she demanded, looking at Michael. "Why let me believe?" "Because it wasn't relevant," Michael interrupted. "Our financial situation is our business. We didn't feel the need to announce Rachel's success to validate our choices." The table had gone completely silent. Even the usual background noise of silverware against china had ceased. Everyone was frozen, watching this drama unfold. "And for the record," I added, unable to stop now that the floodgates had opened, "we're not moving to Westchester. We love our home, the home that I bought, without luck or handouts or family connections." Susan's face had progressed from red to a dangerous purple. "You've been deliberately deceiving us," she said, her voice shaking, "making fools of us." "No, Susan," I replied, "you made assumptions. You never asked about my career or my contributions to our household. You decided I was a charity case, and it was easier for you to believe that than to consider I might be your equal. Equal? Susan scoffed, some of her composure returning. You may have stumbled into some money, but that hardly makes you a miller. You're right, I agreed, standing up from the table. I'm not a miller. I'm Rachel Chen, Chief Security Officer at SecureTech, homeowner, and your daughter-in-law, not because of luck, but because your son loves me for exactly who I am. I placed my napkin beside my plate and looked at Michael. He nodded slightly and stood up beside me. Thank you for dinner, I said to the table at large, but I think it's time Michael and I headed home. As we turned to leave, Robert suddenly stood as well. Wait, he said. Then, to everyone's astonishment, he raised his glass. I'd like to propose a toast to Rachel for her impressive success and for having the grace to tolerate our family's assumptions. Susan made a strangled noise. And to my son, Robert continued, who had the good sense to marry a woman of substance as well as beauty. Michael looked at his father with surprise. Thanks, Dad. As we walked out, I heard the explosion begin behind us. Susan's voice rising in indignation, relatives murmuring in shocked tones, and above it all, Robert's unexpected laughter. In the foyer, as we gathered our coats, Michael pulled me close. That was incredible, he whispered. Are you okay? I nodded, adrenaline still coursing through me. I think so. I didn't plan to do it that way, but it was perfect, he assured me. Absolutely perfect. As we stepped out into the snow-covered driveway, I took one last look at the imposing Miller mansion with its perfect decorations and flawless facade. For the first time since I'd met Michael, I didn't feel intimidated by it or by the family it represented. I was Rachel Chen. I had built my own success, bought my own home, and finally stood my ground. As we drove away, I caught a glimpse of Robert watching us from the window, raising his glass in a silent salute. The fallout was immediate. My phone began buzzing with texts before we even reached the highway. Elizabeth, OMG, that was epic. Michael's cousin Jeffrey, respect, Rachel, seriously. Even Aunt Marjorie sent a message. Been waiting 30 years for someone to stand up to Susan. Brava. Michael and I spent the rest of Christmas night in a hotel, ordering room service and alternating between fits of nervous laughter and serious discussions about what would happen next. He wasn't angry that I'd finally revealed our secret. If anything, he seemed relieved. I should have stood up to her years ago, he admitted, picking at his club sandwich. I just never knew how without causing a complete family meltdown. Do you regret it? I asked, suddenly uncertain. Leaving like that? Not for a second, he said firmly. My only regret is letting her treat you that way for so long. The next morning, we were surprised by a text from Robert asking if we could meet him for coffee before we drove back to Boston. We found him waiting at a small diner away from the family home, looking oddly relaxed in casual clothes I'd never seen him wear before. That was quite an exit, he said as we slid into the booth across from him. I'm sorry if it ruined Christmas, I offered, though I wasn't entirely sure I meant it. Robert waved away my apology. Christmas with Susan is always a production anyway, but I'm not here to discuss that. He took a deep breath. I wanted to say I'm proud of you both, Michael, for building your business on your own terms, and Rachel, for your success and for finally putting some truth on the table. Michael looked stunned. Dad, I don't understand. You've always backed Mom in everything. It was easier, Robert admitted, stirring his coffee. and I thought it made her happy. But after last night, after seeing how she's been treating you two, he shook his head. The cancer diagnosis made me think about what legacy I'm leaving behind. I'm not sure I like what I see. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Susan doesn't know I'm here. She's already called the realtor to cancel that house down payment, which, for the record, I knew nothing about until her announcement. "What's this?" Michael asked, eyeing the envelope. "The crystal vase," Robert said with a slight smile. "Susan's been asking where it is for 2 years. Says she never sees it when she visits." I felt my face flush. "It's in the guest room closet," I admitted. "I take it out when she visits." To my surprise, Robert laughed. "I had a feeling. It's hideous, isn't it? Susan's taste has always been extravagant." He pushed the envelope toward us. "This is the receipt and appraisal. It's worth about $40,000. Sell it. Consider it my belated wedding gift, one without strings attached." "Dad, we can't," Michael began. "You can and you will," Robert insisted. "Susan picked it out to impress, not to be useful or bring joy." "Dad, we can't," Michael began. "You can and you will," Robert insisted. "Susan picked it out to impress, not to be useful or bring joy. I'd rather you have something you actually want." As we prepared to leave, Robert hesitated, then added, "I'm working on Susan. She's complicated. But what you did last night forced me to see some uncomfortable truths about how she treats people, how we both do." That conversation marked the beginning of a significant shift in our family dynamics. Susan didn't speak to us for 3 months. When she finally called, it was with a stiff, clearly rehearsed speech about moving forward as a family. No apology, but it was a start. Robert, however, transformed almost overnight. He began visiting us in Boston, genuinely interested in seeing our home and learning about our work. He finally met my parents when they came to visit, and to everyone's surprise, he and my father bonded over woodworking, a hobby Robert had abandoned decades ago to focus on his investment career. "Your father's a good man," my dad told me after that first meeting, trapped in a life that doesn't quite fit him anymore. 6 months after the Christmas confrontation, Robert announced he was stepping back from the family firm and handing day-to-day operations to his protege. Susan was horrified until he surprised her with a summer-long trip to Europe, something she'd always wanted to do but had postponed for when the time was right. As for the crystal vase, we did sell it, not for ourselves, but to start a scholarship fund for women in STEM from small Midwestern towns. We named it after my grandmother, who had taught high school mathematics for 40 years. When the first recipient was selected, we sent Susan and Robert the announcement. Susan's response was unexpected. The Miller name attached to a scholarship that isn't at an Ivy League? How progressive! But she came to the award ceremony, dressed impeccably as always, and actually listened when the young woman spoke about her dreams of becoming a cybersecurity expert. Our relationship with Susan will never be warm and fuzzy. She still makes occasional cutting remarks, still tries to control family gatherings, and still refers to my career as my computer hobby sometimes. But there's a new underlying respect, begrudging on her part, perhaps, but real. The most surprising development came last Thanksgiving, when Susan actually asked me about my work during dinner. "Robert says your company is doing something with banking security," she inquired, clearly out of her depth, but making an effort. "That sounds important." "It is," I replied, waiting for the backhanded compliment that would surely follow. Instead, she nodded thoughtfully. "My friend Caroline's identity was stolen last month. Perhaps you could explain to her how to better protect herself. It wasn't exactly an olive branch, but it was something close to it. Last month, Michael and I finally had some news to share with the family. I was pregnant, for real this time. After our previous losses, we'd waited until the second trimester to tell anyone. When we called Susan and Robert, I braced myself for Susan's takeover, her insistence on planning the nursery, choosing the name, dictating how the child would be raised. Instead, after the initial excitement, she simply asked, "What can we do to help?" On your terms, of course. Robert later told us that she'd spent hours researching appropriate grandparent boundaries online. She's trying, he said, in her own way. As for that house we supposedly needed, we're staying put. We converted the home office into a nursery, painted a mural of the Ohio countryside where I grew up on one wall, and the Boston skyline where Michael and I built our life together on another. And that Christmas confrontation, it's become something of a legend in the Miller family. Last Christmas, a much smaller, more relaxed affair, Aunt Marjorie actually asked me to tell the story again, for those who weren't lucky enough to witness it firsthand. Susan rolled her eyes but didn't object. Progress in the Miller family comes in small, measured steps. The strangest twist came 3 weeks ago when an unexpected package arrived at our door. Inside was a simple, elegant vase, nothing like the ostentatious crystal monstrosity, with a note in Susan's precise handwriting, "For your home, wherever that may be." It now sits on our dining table, filled with wildflowers that would have never been allowed in the Miller mansion. Every time I look at it, I'm reminded that sometimes standing your ground isn't just about the moment of confrontation. It's about making space for something new to grow in its place. Looking back now, as I feel my baby kick beneath my ribs, I realize that Christmas dinner wasn't just about putting Susan in her place or proving my worth. It was about claiming my voice in a family where I'd been systematically silenced. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply speak your truth, even when, especially when, no one expects you to have one. I don't regret revealing our secret that night. That moment of triumph wasn't about the money or the house. It was about refusing to be defined by someone else's narrow perception. Susan saw me as nothing more than an accessory to her son's life, a charity case who should be grateful for scraps from the Miller table. But I was always so much more than that. We all are. If you're dealing with your own Susan, remember this. Your worth isn't determined by those who underestimate you. Their assumptions are their limitation, not yours. Stand your ground. Speak your truth. And when the moment comes to unwrap your own version of those ownership papers, whatever they might be, do it with your head held high. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about standing up for yourself and finding your voice. Share in the comments about a time you had to stand your ground against someone who underestimated you. I read every comment and would love to hear your experiences. Until next time, remember that the most powerful ownership papers aren't the ones with your name on a deed. They're the ones where you claim ownership of your own story.